get started. Welcome to Selling in Brooklyn. Feel free to ask any questions. We ask that you ask those questions in the chat. If you don't know how to open your chat, just let us know, and we can get you started with that. A few housekeeping items before we get started. So we'll answer those questions throughout, and we will also have a Q&A session at the end. Throughout the presentation, we'll be sharing relevant links for you. And so look out for those. Those will also be in the chat. And even if you can't look at those now, when you're done with this, you'll be emailed a recording of the presentation as well as our home sellers guide and contact information for both myself and Rashidah, so that you can reach out to us to ask any questions that you don't feel like you want to ask publicly, or anything that we don't get to in the course of this presentation. And one more point, we do have a blog series about women-owned businesses, especially in Brooklyn. So part of our ethos is we like to feature women-owned businesses. We like to do women-centered presentations, and we have a great blog about women-owned businesses. So if you know somebody who has a business, if you have a business yourself, please feel free to submit to our blog. We would love to help promote your work. So let's just get started. I am not Victoria Alexander, the owner of Realty Collective. I'm Tina Fallon. I've worked for Victoria for 17 years, and that's because I love working for a woman-owned business. Realty Collective is a boutique real estate firm that was started 18 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate in New York. And we're basically your coach, we're your therapist, we're your sounding board, and we help you get through this incredibly stressful and complicated process of selling in New York, and we try to make it as stress-free as we possibly can. One of the ways that we do that is by introducing you to a really great person on our team, and that's Rashidah Siddiqui. She's a real estate attorney, and I'll let her speak for herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rashidah Siddiqui. I have been practicing real estate law in New York for going on 20 years and a couple of months now. I represent plenty of sellers. My office is located downtown Brooklyn, but I'm licensed in New Jersey as well. And I represent clients in all of the boroughs, including Westchester, Rochester, and Long Island. I look forward to kind of giving you what you need to start preparing yourself as you place your property on the market, so you have a smooth transaction as a seller, because you probably haven't been on the market since when you purchased it, and your documents may be all over the place. So this is a good opportunity to kind of start putting together what you will need legally together to sell that property as well.
So you're obviously here because you're considering selling at some point, maybe now, maybe in the future. We like to go over the reasons why a person might want to sell. So you want to upgrade to a larger space, you're downsizing into a smaller space. The market continues to be hot for certain kinds of properties. So even though everything has really slowed down, as you may have heard from the news and social media or your friends, it is still a good time to sell in Brooklyn, particularly if you've owned your property for a long enough period of time that you're going to be able to sell at a profit. So we're also hearing from people, sadly, who are ready to move out of New York for whatever reason, job transition, and you may not have any choice, but now's the time that you have to sell. So interest rates, I'm sure you've been hearing, have gone kind of, well, it's not even through the roof, but they've more than doubled from this time last year. And as a result, this kind of sticky and complicated time in the market, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this seminar now. And in terms of our timing and thinking about like why you would be selling now. So the market has been in a constant state of flux for the past few years. And you may say, oh, gee, we should have sold last year when interest rates were low. Well, interest rates were low, but inventory was high. So there's still low inventory in New York at this point. And not every buyer is as driven by interest rates as they were this time a year ago. So rents have soared along with those interest rates. And so owning a home in New York continues to be something that people really want to do. And it continues to be a good source of generational wealth for people who are able to hold property for a certain period of time. So if you have a property that can be placed correctly in the market, marketed properly, and you don't have unrealistic expectations, it's just as good a time to sell as it was last year. Big questions that we have for people are, have you owned your property long enough for it to make sense to sell? So we call that the break-even horizon. So is that, have you owned your property for, have you paid off your mortgage? You've owned it for 30 years, or have you held it for 5 years or more? In most cases, if you've held it for 5 years, you've accrued enough equity that you'll be able to sell, get your money out, and hopefully with a certain profit. If you're considering trading up, you do need to factor in the interest rate difference. So if you're paying 3% now, you're going to be paying more on your to borrow that money as you shift into a new property. So it's something that we really want to talk through at the beginning to get your expectations clear. And your opportunity costs in New York are always going to be high relative to other parts of the country. So Rashidah, this is really Rashidah's area of expertise when we talk about those opportunity costs, which we also call closing costs.
Mm-hmm. So in New York, unfortunately, as a seller, I tell clients, like, the government's going to have their hand out. So if you're looking to sell your property, you have one of the major things is New York City and New York State transfer taxes. So if you're in all of the boroughs, it's going to be in New York City transfer tax. And if you're obviously in New York State, there's always a New York State transfer tax. So that's off the top, you have to pay a transfer taxes. Other things that you have to take into consideration is if you have your mortgage, that has to be paid off. If you are on a co-op, there may be a flip tax, which is something that you want to find out from your management company. Some flip taxes are based on the percentage of your selling price. Some are based on the number of shares you own in your co-op. There's also other fees, like you have co-op and condo fees that you have to take into consideration. Those are probably a little bit more minor, such as move-out fees, looking over documents that the transfer agent may charge. But those transfer taxes, flip taxes, your realtor commission, paying off any, if you have a house or a condo, any open real estate taxes that you have on the property. As I said, also your mortgages. So typically you're looking at 8% for your closing costs, not accounting for your mortgage payoff. So that's definitely something you have to consider. Obviously, as a seller, and you should definitely speak to an accountant as well, is potential capital gains, depending on how long you've owned the property. And it's too much to go into right now during this this seminar, but if you do have your property is maybe been rented, so it's considered investment property, and it's only been you've been renting it for a certain time period, and you did at one point use it also as your primary, you may be able to do a 1031 exchange for the investment portion of your property. If it's your primary residence, you have a certain exemption that you get as well. So that's you want to take into consideration as you start pricing out and figuring out what your closing costs. And your agent or your attorney can always do an estimate of your closing costs for you to just kind of get a sense on what you're going to be looking at as your approximate net profit. But definitely things you need in consideration, because all of your closing costs as well are paid off at the closing. So these are things that you don't have to come up front with. So it will be paid off at the closing from the proceeds. The capital gains, if you do have that, is paid when you do your taxes, but you still want to put that aside, because once again, if it's dependent on the type of amount that you have or how long you've owned the property, that may be a consideration that you have to take into when you're thinking about selling your property.
This is one of the reasons why we do these workshops, is that these are things that you may need 6 months, a year to get your head around as you're getting ready to sell. So we never want to race people into or rush anybody into sales. Sometimes it takes a while to get everything clear with your financial planner, with your attorney. And so it's never too soon to be thinking about what is going to be happening at the time of your sale. So Now, if you have decided now is the right time, and let's think about if your property is really what people are looking for. So I think we don't even have to go into that slide. So we want to make sure that you are selling something that somebody wants to buy. Remember, you only need one buyer, but buyers right now are still looking for renovated properties by and large. But we are beginning to see, just in 2023, we're seeing a return to people who are willing to buy a kind of fixer upper so that their initial purchase price is lower. When money was really inexpensive to borrow, people were preferring to buy renovated homes. At this point, they're looking to shave their costs wherever they can. And so it's an opportunity right now. If you have something that needs some work, it's a better opportunity this year than it was this time last year. So, but there is a property, there's a buyer for every property. It's really just a matter of finding, marketing to those people and finding the one for you. So you don't have to worry about scaling this up and selling it to a massive market. You really just need one buyer. And so that's what we do, is we really target your marketing to be able to find the one buyer who you need to close. So before we do any of that, we also want to know if you have a plan for after you sell. So I think there's not a one size fits all sales scenario. Whatever you need from this process, we can tailor it to fit your needs. So if you are moving out of town and you need the proceeds from your sale, for example, before you can buy or rent something in your new home, well, we can work out a deal term so that you're allowed to stay in your home after your closing, so that you will have the funds that you need to be able to make that transition. That's just one example of things that we can do. Just knowing where you're going, what your timeline is, and what your bottom line is, really where, what's the number below which you're not willing to sell. Those are all things that we want to talk about frankly, and make sure we really get our heads around. We've subtracted out those closing costs to make sure that you know what your net return is going to be, and that you know what your tax implications are going to be of that net return. I mean, we hope you have capital gains. Like, that's a great thing to have capital gains. That means you sold for a lot of money. And but we want to work through all of that with you before we put your home on the market, because once the home goes on the market, it tends to have things happen quite quickly. It's a huge transformation. At the center of it, there is this transaction, but we want to make sure we've managed your expectations before we put it on the market, and that we have a plan for what we're going to do after the closing. So timing, it really is anywhere from 4 to 6 months in a kind of a perfect scenario, once we have signed a listing agreement, to when you're closing and moving out of your home. And so if you can factor in that amount of time, sometimes it happens more quickly. If you need it to happen more quickly, there's things that we can do. For one, we can offer it for a lower price, but that's a good timeline to be able to think about, is 4 to 6 months. So after you've decided to sell, and we've developed a strategy, or you've developed a strategy with the agent that you're working with, it's time to really start the selling process. And we've got a couple of links here about what to ask a real estate agent, because the next step is really to assemble your team. And your key team for this sale is going to be the real estate agent who's going to be brokering your home, and your real estate attorney. And you definitely need to know your, sorry, I'm reading from my slide over here. You need to know your property type. You need to call and interview people. You want to know if they can get on they can rep your property right away. This is a job that you are hiring somebody for, and so you want to take your job search seriously. And also think about what your communication style is. What do you want from an agent? Do you want somebody who is going to be available 24 hours a day? Would you rather have somebody who has a big team, even if it means you don't get the sort of star broker to be showing your home? And we have this list of questions that you can ask just to find out how your property is going to be handled by that agent or by that agent's team. And they need to be clear with you about when we're doing our open houses, how we're doing our scheduled showings, all of that, so that it suits your needs. And interview people until you find someone. And if you have a clear idea of how you want the process to go, feel free to share that game plan with your agent. Your agent may not agree with your game plan, but it's a great way to get started in getting to know people who you're going to spend an awful lot of time with over the next 4 to 6 months. We also really recommend that you work with someone who knows your neighborhood. So somebody who knows your neighborhood, or even within a neighborhood, maybe somebody who knows your building. If you're in a large building, somebody who understands how your board works if you're in a co-op. And so there are a lot of different things to take into consideration when you're interviewing an agent. You also want to make sure you've got somebody who can market your property to the MLS. So our company, for example, is a very small company. We're a boutique firm. We don't have shareholders. We're only based in New York, and we work very closely with our clients. That said, we still have access to the same multiple list services. We still market our homes using the same streams that all of the large companies do. We're members of REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York, and so we have pre-negotiated sharing terms so that the brokers from those other brokerages know that they can work with us and that we can work with them. So even a small company is able to give you access to the wide world of real estate marketing, but how you want that handled is really up to you. And when you found a good agent, you can develop that strategy together. At least as important as your real estate agent at this stage in the process is getting a great real estate attorney to help make sure you're ready to sell. And Rashidah's got some ideas about how you can interview that person.
Yeah, definitely. Real estate in New York, you must have an attorney to represent you as a seller. I would say, aside from the documents that your attorney is going to be preparing, such as the deed, the transfer tax documents, working with your agent, working with the buyer's side, working with the title company or the lien search company in order to get things cleared and prepared for the closing. Your attorney is also going to be holding the buyer's down payment in escrow. So the attorney must have a escrow account, which is called an IOLA escrow account. So a couple of things when you're looking for an attorney, 100% you must ask the attorney, and I would say is, how long has the attorney been practicing? And what do they what's their practice area? Do they do personal injury and maybe dab in real estate? Do they do landlord tenant and dab in real estate? Or are they a real estate attorney? Because real estate moves pretty quickly once you get into contract, or even getting you into contract closings. You want your attorney to attend the closing. So you want to make sure that your attorney is available and actually does practice real estate. So if something comes up, they know how to work with the title company. They know what to get if it's an estate sale and it's a co-op or a house or a condo. They know how to work with the management companies and documents they need to get from you, and also from the buyer side and from the management company. So definitely when you're interviewing your attorney, you want to find out how many real estate deals have they worked on? What type of properties do they work on? And as I said, do they primarily do real estate, or do they practice in another area of law? So that's, as I said, it's real estate. It's very time intensive, very paperwork intensive, and you want to make sure that your attorney is able to handle that. So those are just a few questions that you should definitely ask your attorney.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we are soliciting buyers for your property. So we talked a little bit about, what your agent strategy would be, and a lot of us have ways that we work and things that we do, but the strategy for your home is going to be really specific to your property. So there's things that we want to make sure are ready to go before we put the property on the market. We always say we want to tell a consistent story from the photographs that people look at when it first pops up online. The narrative around that needs to be consistent. And when somebody shows up in the apartment, they should feel like, oh, here's the thing I fell in love with online. That's what we really want people to feel. And that's one of the reasons, for example, that we don't use virtual staging in our company. We do staging, and our company does its own staging. We're a small company, so one of the ways we compete with the big guys is that we provide staging for our clients free of charge. But I think that's something that's really important that you assess when you're talking to a broker is, what are their plans? Do they plan to just leave the home as is and take photographs? Do they plan to do a little bit of decluttering? If it's an empty home, do they plan on staging or doing virtual staging? We, again, don't like the virtual staging because people show up and they say, where's all that furniture from the picture that I've been looking at? And when a room doesn't have furniture in it, it can be very difficult for a buyer to imagine, where's their bed going to be? Is my queen size bed going to fit in this room? Is my king size bed going to fit in this room? And that's why you really want to have furniture there, so people can actually imagine themselves living in the space. So we solicit buyers from the same places that most other companies do. So you probably know from your own searches, maybe you use Zillow, you use Trulia. In New York City, you use StreetEasy, and that's really where we want to put your property. We want to put it in front of everybody's eyeballs. We can feature those listings so that you're going to be showing up on the top of the pages, even if you've been on the market for a little while, and that's. But everybody has an opportunity to make that first impression on those different sites. And we want to make sure that that impression that we're giving is consistent with your home and brings you the best and most qualified buyers for your place. And in terms of getting people in and through, so we're in a very different market from where we were a year ago, where there were, bidding wars on all properties, where there was this kind of frenzy for people to get into homes before interest rates went up any further. And now we are seeing a lot of shoppers in the marketplace. So people who are happy to come and see your home, show up for the first open house, they make an appointment, they seem quite eager, they've got pre-approvals, but then they don't make an offer. It's a little bit slower in that way right now. It's okay. We just want everybody to know it's all right if you don't get offers off of your first open house. Things are just moving slower right now. It doesn't mean you're not going to get a great offer. So I think sometimes sellers can feel a little bit panicked where, oh no, it's been on the market for a week. Where are my offers? Well, we're not where we were a year ago. If it takes a few weeks for it to come in, you're still going to find a good buyer. So as long as we've positioned it well in the market, we should be able to find a good buyer. If we're on the market for more than a month and we haven't found your buyer, then we're probably overpriced. And if we're overpriced and yet we're still at your bottom line, you do not want to sell below this number, then we need to talk about alternatives to selling at this moment. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about before we put the home on the market is, okay, if we don't sell it within the first 6 weeks, first 8 weeks, then do we maybe want to take it off the market and rent it for a period of time? Do you want to move back in? What are the alternatives for you if it doesn't sell? Again, a conversation we were not having a year ago. A year ago, everything was selling. And this year, we just want to make sure that we have a plan B in place, which is either going to be a reduction of the price or potentially removing the home from the market and putting it back on. That said, do we think the market's going to get better? We don't know. Nobody can predict. So these are all real, frank conversations that you want to have with your broker beforehand. And then before we also put it on the market and keep jumping back and forth, we do want to make sure that there aren't going to be any issues that come up during the due diligence period that we haven't addressed before marketing the home. And I think Rashidah can give us a little bit more insight into that.
Yeah, definitely some things that you want to start doing as you think about putting your property on the market is, the notices. You want to see if you have any violations, if you did work on the property, or if it's a co-op or a condo and you did some alterations. Did your contractor sign off and get all of the paperwork? If it's a house, and you did some alterations, or you added a deck, or you did anything to the property, make sure that all of that kind of paperwork with any work you did on the property, you've closed out any permits, or at least look to see that so you can start the process to start doing that. So you don't have to wait until you get into contract to start doing that, because that will delay your closing. If it's a co-op or a condo, you want to start getting your documents together, such as the offering plan for the property, the financials for the property, all of your kind of foundational documents, which means you may have to contact your management company if you don't have it handy, so that you'll have it handy and you can give to your agent when they need it, when you have that offer. Because as Tina said, it moves pretty quickly once you get to that part of you've listed the property, you have an offer coming in, you definitely start getting into contract pretty quickly at that time. So just some due diligence. I tell clients, as you start kind of like rearranging things and moving things around, your deed, your stock certificate, your proprietary lease, all of the ownership documents that you have, put that aside. If you refinance your mortgage at some point, put those paperwork aside. Just any of the kind of paperwork that you have to the property, don't shred, don't throw it away, put it aside. You may find something that your attorney may need when you get into contract. And then after you close, actually after you do your taxes, then you can probably shred some of the documents, but definitely any of kind of like those foundational documents you want to put aside for your property.
And I want to add also that one of the things that we're finding from lenders right now is that it does feel like the due diligence process is particularly detailed lately. That we're seeing banks and title companies ask for things that they maybe would have let slide previously. I don't know if that's just my perception or if that's something that you're seeing as well, Rashidah.
Definitely seeing, I call it pulling teeth. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that a lot more. And it's just everybody's just a little bit just as I said, not that they weren't diligent before, it's
Right.
not that they're definitely crossing the T's, dotting the I's. If there's violations, before we can, as an attorney, close with money put in escrow. Now banks are a little bit more stringent and they're like, no, we want that violation to be cleared up. So as a seller, you don't want your buyer to get into contract and get a lender and then find out you have a violation that's going to take 90 days or several months to clear up, and you can't do that. So now you lose your buyer. So as a seller, you can always pull the information from your on your property, HPD, which is Housing Preservation Department, Department of Buildings, to just look up and see what's going on in regard to your property.
Yeah. And let's say we have done all of that work, we've properly priced the home, we've marketed it, and we're starting to receive offers on the home. So this is a really this is a challenging piece for you as a seller. Considering offers is a hard part of the job. And for some of the reasons that we were just discussing, you may be getting an offer that is for a lower price, but a significantly more qualified buyer, and then maybe an offer for a higher price from a less qualified buyer. In the market that we're in right now, we really want to take seriously the well-qualified buyers. So we have a property right now that's been in contract for a couple of months. And even though it's a qualified buyer from whom we had received a really solid pre-approval letter from Wells Fargo, there are currently some issues with that, with the lender, and there's a chance that the buyer won't get the mortgage. Well, we've been off the market for the past couple of months. We can't show it really while it's in contract. And so we're now really working hard to get that buyer a new mortgage. And that's something that as I represent the seller, I'm not usually involved in that part of the process. But in a tricky market like the one we're in, all buyers are really golden, and you want to hang on to them if you possibly can. So sometimes that buyer comes in and it's the first offer you receive. And sometimes you do get that first offer after the first open house. And then you think, oh gosh, I underpriced it. You didn't underprice it. You and your agent did exactly what you needed to do to solicit the offers. And sometimes the first offer is the best offer. That's somebody who's been in the market for a while. They've been looking, maybe they've been outbid on a couple of other properties. They're qualified. They have a broker representing them. They take it seriously. They're jumping through the hoops. Doesn't mean you're going to get a better offer than that. The first offer is sometimes the best offer you'll get. So make sure to take all of the offers seriously. We also, in our practice, we recommend that if an offer isn't where you need it to be, even if it's low enough to seem like it's an insulting number, we ask our sellers to counter every offer. So just because somebody comes in with a complete lowball offer doesn't mean they couldn't be your buyer. So counter every offer, because my job is to negotiate everything to get it to the point where I'm presenting to you the best possible offers from the best, widest range of buyers so that you can make an educated choice about which one is right for you. Even so, we've got it and let's say we've gotten to an accepted offer. We have to be prepared to offer concessions, credits, adjust the price accordingly after we've initially accepted an offer. So in New York, generally speaking, you're going to do the inspection of the property in between the accepted offer and the signing of the contract. We only have about a week, maybe 2 weeks for that to happen. And something may come up in your inspection that you knew about or that we knew about in advance. Something may come up that you didn't know about. And we don't want the buyers to walk away. So be prepared to offer sometimes a concession. So say there's an appliance that you haven't used, the air conditioning, it's April and you haven't used the air conditioning, and we turn the air conditioning on and it's not working. That's a place where we can either offer a credit to the buyers at closing so that they can do the repair on their own. Or as Rashidah was saying, a lot of places are going to want you to do those repairs in advance. So we want to be on top of those things as much as we can, and make sure that there are as few obstacles to closing as we possibly can. So once we have accepted an offer, we, your brokers, will send out a deal sheet to your attorneys. So we characterize the terms of it. So not just the purchase price, but any of the other things that we have agreed to. So let's say you would like to stay in the home after the closing. That's something that we would write into the deal sheet. Or if the buyer is asking that, if the buyer is asking for some sort of a concession that we know about in advance, that's something we would write into the deal sheet. We send those over to the attorneys, and hopefully your broker has a good relationship with your attorney so that we can have a conversation ahead of time, so that we can avoid surprises, because surprises lead to delays, and delays are the big deal killer. So I've sent that deal sheet over to you, Rashidah, and then your real estate attorney takes the baton and picks it up from there.
So yeah, so basically now it's a live deal, I guess what Tina would say. Either you've got your offer, it's sent out to the attorney. Your attorney first has to draft the contract of sale. And the information to draft that contract is on that deal sheet: purchase price, mortgage amount, the seller's information, buyer's information. That information in the contract then goes over to the buyer's side. The buyer's attorney and the buyer signs the contract first and give the deposit. If you're selling a co-op or a condo, before that contract can be signed, the buyer's attorney has to do what we call due diligence of the condo and the co-op building. So that's why that's important that you have your documents that I had mentioned earlier, such as your offering plan, financials, and everything over to your broker, because those things are happening simultaneously. So you don't want to have your contract go out and now you're just looking for documents that is going to take another week or two to start getting, which can delay the signing of your contract if you're looking at selling a co-op or a condo. So as I said, that due diligence for the attorney, they have to do that prior to signing the contract. Once that's completed, then the buyer will sign the contract. If you're selling a house, the main thing would be doing the inspection that will happen. And then once that's completed, then the buyer will sign the contract. Closing time periods in the contract, there's lots of goals. As a seller, if they're getting a mortgage, there's typically a 30 to 45 day time period for that buyer to get the mortgage. And in the background, you're not doing much as a seller, but the buyer side is their bank is doing underwriting, getting an appraisal on the property. If it's a co-op or a condo, they also are approving the buildings. So that's going on in the background while you're in contract. You don't have much to do during that time period, but it's just something that you should be aware of, because if something comes up and they're not able to get their mortgage, they do have a right to cancel the contract and get the return of your deposit. Closing or kind of time periods for you to close is typically 60 days if you're looking at a house or a condo. If it's a co-op, you're looking at about 60 to 90 days. So once again, things move pretty quickly depending on where you are with that process, because you've got into contract, it takes about a week or so. Now you're in a firm contract of sale. Don't have a right to cancel if the buyer gets their mortgage or get approved by the co-op building. So there's no coming back and say, Rashidah, I changed my mind after they've signed the contract and you've signed it. Up until the contract is signed by both parties, you do have a right to not sign the contract. But once it's signed by both parties, you are in a firm contract, subject to those contingencies that have to happen. So that's that contracting portion of the transaction, and it moves pretty quickly. Your attorney will go over all of the terms with you, explain to you your time periods. Contract, you have to be out of the property in time for the closing. So you want to make sure that you understand what an on or about 60-day closing means, what you understand when it means vacant and broom clean on the day of the closing. If you're not going to be out, that's something that has to be in that deal sheet, so your attorney can put in a possession agreement or put in provisions regarding you staying in the property for a certain amount of days, and kind of terms that will govern that time period that you have the right to stay in the property. Because if it's not in the contract, it's not binding.
And that time period can move quite quickly, and it can also feel interminable. So that period of time, it can be really challenging for you as a seller. You're waiting for things to happen. You're waiting for the closing to be scheduled. And especially if you have already moved out of the home and you're continuing to pay the mortgage on it, it can feel very frustrating to carry a vacant property while you wait for somebody's paperwork to come through. That on or about date in the contract is not something, the day after the on or about date doesn't mean the contract expires. It can go on, right, for about 30 days.
Yes, typically it's a 30-day grace period, and even after that it doesn't expire until you send out a notice, what they call a time of essence in New York. So your contracts really don't expire, but there's just time periods that you have to give the other side in order to give them to the right to close. Because in New York, there's so many moving parts regarding, especially if they're getting a mortgage, especially if it's a co-op or a condo, and they're waiting on third parties to get documents. So have to be mindful of that when you're selling your property, that on or about time period with a grace period of 30 days.
And we, as brokers, we will keep your home. If we've staged your home, we will keep our staging furniture in your home until the closing is scheduled. Because if there is a financing contingency in your deal, and there's a chance that that your buyer will not get a mortgage, and that is a chance that you are taking when you agree to a financing contingency, we want to be prepared to be able to put it back on the market and sell it again as quickly as we possibly can. So that period of time it can be stressful, but we want you to know that we've got your back during that time, and we will do everything we can to market the home again if in the rare event that it doesn't close. Most deals do close, just to be clear, but you know, in times where in tricky financial times, sometimes a person who thinks they're going to get a mortgage will not get the mortgage. And that's one of the reasons why, when you're looking at the offers, you may take an offer that's a lower number from a more qualified buyer, just to avoid having to carry a vacant home for an extended period of time. So yeah, we'll help you. We make sure you get moved out, and then before the closing, the closing is scheduled. We do a final walkthrough. So during that final walkthrough, we want to make sure that the home is, as Rashidah said, in broom clean condition. We like to have it be even a little bit cleaner than that for the buyers. So sometimes we'll kick in for cleaning, but the key thing is that everything mechanically that was working at the time of the contract, or has been promised to be working at the time of the closing, is now in functional order. So people are going to come back through and they're going to say, all right, let's try the dishwasher. If the dishwasher doesn't work, we have until the closing to get the dishwasher fixed, or to provide a credit to the buyers if they're willing to accept that. But there's a lot of we want to make sure that we've got everything is in good working order by the time we do the final walkthrough. And that final walkthrough is generally within 24 hours of the closing. So it doesn't leave us a lot of wiggle room to negotiate if something goes wrong.
And just for the scheduling, so we mentioned that the closing takes roughly about 60 days, 60 to 90 days if it's a co-op. So as you're thinking as a seller, because the property has to be vacant and broom clean in time for them to do their walkthrough and for the closing, you always want to have a conversation with your attorney. The closings are done in person. When you're signing the contract in the beginning, 30 days before, 60 days before, you probably signed it electronically. So you can still sign it in person, but that early stage, it can be a virtual meeting with your attorney, signing it electronically. But for the closing itself, hard signatures are required. So you either have to attend the closing in person, or you can give your attorney power of attorney to close on your behalf. But even that power of attorney document has to be prepared, approved. You have to go before a notary, witnesses. So you want to have conversations with your attorney on your time and schedule. Are you going to be leaving the state? Are you going to be on vacation? What about the keys? Those type of things, because once your attorney's scheduling the closing, it has to be scheduled with multiple parties. So they take those things into consideration, your availability, the other side's availability. If they have a rate lock issue, where are you? Can you travel back to the New York for the closing if you moved out of state? Or you give your attorney power of attorney before you leave the state to make sure that all of that's done for the closing, to sign those documents in person.
All right, I know it's a lot of information to take in, but the good news is at this point we've gotten you through your final walkthrough. Everything has been approved. You're at the closing with Rashidah, and you are about to receive probably like the largest check you will ever get in your life after the bank takes its piece, and you know the tax people take their pieces, and your real estate broker takes her piece. It is a great feeling, and it can be an absolutely transformational event for people. And it's very stressful as you go through it, but when we see our clients' lives change as a result of this process, and change for the better, it is incredibly satisfying. We really love what we do.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, as a seller, the good thing about it is you're walking away with some money. So it's always good. So you should have a smile on your face. Everything is, you're at this point of the transaction, the closing, the buyer is signing the majority of the documents. At this point, you're kind of just waiting and sitting there, maybe 20 minutes of signing documents, but your main goal is to wait for your check to be issued to you and run across the street to the bank and deposit it. But it is, even though being prepared and getting the documents and having your stuff now that you're kind of watching these seminars will help you make that process smoother. Because if something comes up, you have a good attorney that knows real estate, you have a good agent that knows real estate, they're working together, you have the paperwork that you didn't throw away, that something came up, you can give to your agent, you can give to your attorney, so that they can make this process go smoothly as they can. There's all things that always come up, but at least you know that you're prepared.
Yeah. And if you're not prepared, if you're completely unprepared starting right now, we can still get you prepared in time to sell your home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's it. It's kind of record time to get through our process. I don't see any questions in the chat. So if anybody wants to add some, you can feel free. But otherwise, you have our contact information. If you don't have it now, it will be emailed to you. And if you'd like to reach out to any of us, just call us. Our time it doesn't cost you anything to call us and ask us some questions and interview us. We're very happy to talk about it. And as I mentioned, we really love what we do, and we're happy to help people through this change in their lives. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Rashidah.
Thank you. Wonderful seminar again.
Excellent. Okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.